roadside assistance.
We're gonna need it.
Yes, we are.
It's extra peace of mind that no other insurance can match. Plus member savings when you bundle your auto and home insurance.
Even better. I could use AAA right now.
Join today at AAA.com. Get great auto insurance and more for the road ahead. AAA.
Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. You good old boys in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south. They're the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful March the 23rd, 2021. Round of Deportes. Bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, we're sitting around here looking at overcast skies, waiting on that next storm to come in, just like March Madness has come in and blown everybody away. Once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, and first responders. They're there to pick up everybody who's been blown away.
They pick up everybody, too. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars also all around the world. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic. He'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at us to a picture. Man, I love pausing, Big C. I love pausing, and I love praying. I'll never stop pausing and praying on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why should everybody care?
Well, Charlton, we think about all of what our veterans have provided for us in this country, Charlton, but yet we lose over 24 a day to suicide. And it's easy to see why people get so distracted, Charlton, from everything else that's going on. When we think about we've had 2 mass shootings in America over the last week, Charlton, and COVID-19 going on. People have mental fatigue, but our veterans suffer through mental fatigue, physical fatigue all the time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it has led to suicide to too many of those great veterans, Charlton, as a country, as a people. We need to find a way to come together and unite all our souls and find a way to stop this horrific disease of suicide amongst American veterans and private citizens.
I love doing our part. Very well said. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net. And you can definitely get some help for our veterans and their loved ones. Also very happy to be affiliated with Valley Homes Weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants and the Say Hey Kid, as well as a home run king Barry Bonds. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country, putting people back to work just like McDonald's does it. Car dealerships do it. Sports teams do it. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. Most of our loans are underwritten by Rocket Mortgage, the #1 lender in the country on the wholesale side. I also want to say thank you to Xfinity, Comcast TV, and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and do it now. Say play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up anywhere in the world. And I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. Big C, I know when we look at so many things that are going on in this country, it's like 80 degrees right now in California. And I know we're actually in spring, so I guess we already had spring. It kind of felt like spring since Christmas. It's been like 80 degrees almost every day. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we have up and down days, Charlton. We get yo-yo weather around here. I mean, one morning you wake up, the ground is white from the frost and everything. The next day you got the bees flying all around because of all the heat that has risen. So, I mean, people are wondering why they can never stay healthy. You know, allergies down here in this area of the country are really bad because of all the pollen and everything. But, Charlton, it's been a weird year all the way around.
Yeah, it really has been a weird year all the way around. But we got to rise and shine no matter what. I want to get into some African-American history. But you know how we talk about that more people should give out our Veterans Crisis Hotline? They've been giving it out on CNN News. I want to thank the great Don Lemon for giving out the Veterans Crisis Hotline. They also call it the Crisis Hotline for veterans, also their loved ones. So thank you, CNN, for doing your part. I know, Big C, you've been doing that for about the past 2 years now, so good job on that with CNN News. Big C, African-American history, African-American sports history. We celebrate the accomplishments of these lesser-known great African-American athletes, earlier American sports heroes. When you think about the history of sports and the heroes of it, Big C, when I think about this, it's important because oftentimes you just don't hear about it. And you don't hear much about it, and most people won't even talk about it until we bring it up. And so that's why I love bringing things up when it comes to African-American history. But I really want to go into the fact that everybody, when they think about it, without history, you're doomed to repeat it. And everybody needs to know that it's out there. So hopefully we don't repeat it, Big C. And that's the major thing that I love about doing the African-American history. I'm going to tell you something before I even bring that up to you. I know, talking to some older people, oftentimes they tell me of things that happened before I was even born. And if I didn't read about it, I wouldn't even know about it. That's why it's so important to bring it up. When you think about one of every pro team's Jackie Robinson, I want to go back to July 8th, 1949, Big C, well before I was born. The great Hank Thompson and Don Newcomb. Hank Thompson is the first African-American batter to face another African-American pitcher. When Don Newcomb's Brooklyn Dodgers played the New York Giants, Big C, it was the second team that Thompson had integrated back in those days. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, as we look at black sports history, and I know when growing up, all we ever heard about was Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier in the National League. You know, history books would let you believe that no other blacks played in the National League, Charlton, other than Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
But yet the contribution of so many of these great black athletes over the years and decades, Charlton, to every major professional sport in America has been very profound.
Yeah.
You know, I remember as a kid talking with my great-grandfather and, you know, talking to him about his days in the Negro Leagues where he played at second base. And so to realize that you were part of a great lineage of African-American history, even without knowing about the rest of the players around the league, Joe.
Yep, and you won't hear it because they don't have people around to tell them, and mainstream doesn't really care about black American history, especially when it comes to baseball, unless it's just Jackie Robinson, Big C. But think about this. It was July 17th, 1947, 12 days after Larry Doby's debut with the Cleveland Indians, Big C. Thompson became the second African-American leaguer, Big C, as well as the third black 20th century major leaguer after Doby and Jackie Robinson. And again, people only hear about Jackie Robinson, only 21 years old at the time. Great Thompson, he gained his lasting distinction of being the youngest black player to integrate big leagues, Big C. It's amazing. 2 days later, he and Willard Brown became the first African-American players to play together in the big league since Moses Fleetwood Walker, Big C, and the brother Weldy teamed up for the Toledo team at that time in the 19th century, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, it showed the greatness of black athletes, Charlton. Jackie Robinson, as they say, crossed the color line in the major leagues. But they started going after younger and even better players than Jackie Robinson, Charlton. They knew the fruits of the Negro Leagues at that time.
Yeah.
That those players were tremendous and that they would make their organizations better. You know, we talked about yesterday how Don Newcomb came back from the war, Charlton, in Korea and won a World Series with the Dodgers.
Yep.
These black athletes had mental and physical stamina.
Yeah, and just like a lot of the older African-American men, no one's going to talk about them. No one's going to mention the name. It's as if they think saying Jackie Robinson is going to do it all, Big C. But think about this. A few days after that, Thompson became the first African-American player to appear in an official Major League game at Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, Big C. And then later that season, he and Dolby became the first African-American players to compete against each other in a big league game. Interestingly enough, Thompson and Jackie Robinson, who was stationed at first base his rookie year, was the first African-American major leaguer second baseman. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about the positions that African-American players have dominated, Charlton. And for years, whites wanted to say that black athletes didn't have the mental awareness to command these particular positions in games, whether it was football, baseball, or basketball, Charlton, but it was shown to be wrong. All these young men needed was an opportunity. And once they got an opportunity, Charlton, the pipeline was continuously there.
Yep.
The biggest fear amongst whites at that time, Charlton, is that the more blacks that they let into the league, the less employment there was going to be for white players.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about rising and shining, Big C. When you think about it, though, and again, people don't know this stuff because they're so focused on who's the GOAT, like guys they've seen over the last 30 years. But when Thompson led off for the Giants at that time on the East Coast, Big C, against the Brooklyn Dodgers, also on the East Coast, in his National League debut, July 8th, 1949, would you believe he became only the fifth African-American National Leaguer behind Robinson and Royal Campanella, Big C, Don Newcomb, and Dan Bankhead of the Dodgers? People don't know that stuff, Big C. Your thoughts?
They don't. I mean, it's like, Charlton, it's so appreciative to hear about the black history of the black athletes in America and the accomplishments that they achieved and how they crossed the lines during the era, Charlton, where they were lynching black men in America for succeeding. And yet these black men were going out there risking their lives, dominating against white players of that era, Charlton, and never getting the proper recognition because of their color.
They never got it then, and they don't get it now, with the exception of Big C Sports. Facing Newcomb in his first plate appearance, Big C, would you believe he became the first African-American hitter to hit against a black pitcher in the big leagues during the 1951 season? He would make history again when he and future Hall of Famers Monty Irvin and Willie Mays Hayes, Big C, I call him the great Willie Mays Hayes, Big C, because that's part of the movie, but great Willie Mays, we honor Willie Mays in every opening of Big C Sports, Big C, became the first three African-American major leaguers to load the bases. You'll never hear that on mainstream. And in the World Series that fall, Big C, the same trio, they formed the first all-black big league outfield, Big C. Your thoughts?
And you think about how great that must have felt for those men back in that day, Charlton, to look to your left and look to your right and see somebody who looks just like you. And you think about it, you're in a World Series and you're the best outfield that you can put on paper in the field of play at that time, Charlton.
Yeah.
I know it's a common thing now to look around and see a minority outfield in professional baseball, but you think about in that era of the early 50s, Charlton, that you sit there and you look, and all these black men are sitting out there, but think about the vitriol that they were getting out of the stands, the negative connotations that were said towards them, and yet they still went out and performed at a high level.
Yeah, they really knocked out Jim Crow, Big C. You think of Hank Thompson, Don Newcomb, and then you think of, Willie Mays. We always talk about Willie Mays on every show, and a living legend, just probably the father of San Francisco Giants baseball. I know they had so many great players, Juan Marichal, McCovey. They even have McCovey Cove named after the great Willie McCovey, Big C. But
well, you think about Willie Mays, Charlton. He ended his professional career with 660 home runs.
Yeah.
Yet he lost 2 years of playing time serving in the Korean War.
Yeah.
So if Willie Mays, as well as Don Newcomb and many other black athletes, had not served in the Korean War, where would they be in today's record book in Major League Baseball?
Yeah, and that's the major, I love it so much because I remember they were doing a tribute to Barry Bonds, and they had that at, now it's called Oracle Ballpark, AT&T Ballpark, Pac-Bell Ballpark, and they had the great Willie Mays there. And he was saying, put Barry in the Hall of Fame. He wants to see it in his lifetime, Big C. And what these men never really talk about, as the crowd cheers when they mention the name and what they did on the diamond field, they never mention that they did their success through Jim Crow. Now, I challenge anybody all over the world, when you talk about oppression and you talk about fighting through oppression, even mainstream media, when they talk about the greats that donned the sports fields in the United States, they never mention more than maybe 5 seconds that they did it in Jim Crow. So they had to be tougher outside of the sports arena than they had to be inside. Inside of the sports arena, Big C, baseball, basketball, football, they're protected by security. They're protected by referees. They're protected by, if you're in football, you got 11 teammates on the field with you making up on each side of the ball. Baseball, you got 9 teammates. In basketball, you got 5 teammates out there. Once they left the field, Big C, they didn't bring security with them. They didn't have their teammates to help them. They had to deal with a lot of vitriol, and they still performed, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I think about the vitriol of today when we get all the negativity about Black Lives Matter, when they protest for equal rights and protection under the law in America. You think about how many white people are alive today in America, Charlton, because blacks sacrificed in every war that America has fought on American soil and foreign soil to keep their butts safe. And these Americans didn't ask for anything other than equal citizenship, Charlton.
Yep, and that's why it's important when you start talking about the GOAT. If you really want to know who the GOATs are, it's the men who have to worry about, is my family safe? Am I still safe? Once they hung up the cleats and left the stadium that day because society still lived in Jim Crow, and that means they didn't have equal protection under the law. And people think, well, that's in the past. That's in the past. We don't have to worry about that. But congratulations to all those great men, and especially Willie Mays to say, hey, kid. I want to jump over into college basketball. And it's the same thing that I was talking about, Big C, going on the African-American history. When you realize how great African-American men, they have to be strong, not only playing the sports, but sometimes they were booed, but they have to be even stronger when they walked outside of the stadium because security didn't follow them. College basketball. Illinois big man Kofi Cockburn, Big C, is the second player to face racist comments on social media. That's following a loss in the NCAA tournament. You say, what's that got to do with Willie Mays? Willie Mays and Jackie Robinson, they were facing the same garbage back in the day. His post came a day after Ohio State's E.J. Liddell received threatening and insulting social media messages following the second-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes loss to number 15 seed Oral Roberts, Big C. They posted images of these messages, including one that said, I hope you blankety blank, pass away. And I really do. People wrote that. It's easier to do that on social media than standing in a man's face. And then the other messages, they included a lot of racist insults. And I just wonder why so many people still feel it's necessary to do that, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I'm going to take it from this perspective that it had to be somebody white when he said, I hope you die, Negro, or, whatever terminology he used. But, these are young men that are college athletes that are out there trying their hardest every opportunity they get on the court.
Yeah.
They don't go out there to lose. They go out there to win and represent their universities, their families, and themselves.
Yeah.
And to get this type of vitriol, the hatred, it hasn't changed in the last 85 years, 75 years in sports in America. These are the same words that Jackie Robinson, Don Newcomb, and Larry Doby, and all those other great black athletes had to deal with when they crossed that color line in Major League Sports, Charlton. When you don't have a jersey on, they don't think about you as being a part of the mainstream. They only cheer for you when you're winning and you're representing and bringing them joy. The minute you're not doing something that they feel is beneficial towards them, society turns on black athletes every day, whether they're professional, collegiate, or high school. But there's no place in America that should be accepting this. These universities, and I'm glad that they're, turning this over to investigations, trying to track down these people that are making these threats to these young men. But, Charlton, we should not have to live with this in 2021. When we see all the hatred that still goes across in America led by the Republican Party, how can you ever have a fair and equal society?
Yeah, it's just part of it. That's why I love bringing it up. I just want to touch on, because when I think about those great African-American men, many in the Hall of Fame, they did it through Jim Crow, but you'll never see in the Hall of Fame men who were inducted into the Hall of Fame. You'll never see they did their work under Jim Crow, because that distinguishes how society has treated people separate and unequal. I want to just mention something. I know you watch a lot of...
Really, let me inject something here. Has Jim Crow gone away? We got 43 states trying to enact 255 different voting restrictions laws, which is taking it back to Jim Crow. And most of those states have gotten them to pass already, Charlton. So when you're talking about that, I was watching last night that down in Georgia, that if somebody's standing in a voting line and they've been there for hours and you give them a bottle of water, you can get charged with a crime. You will be charged with a crime. So that's Jim Crow. I mean, the only thing they haven't said is you're going to count the number of jelly beans in the jar yet.
Yeah, I mean, there've been a lot of shenanigans, and they're trying to bring them back into existence, and that's why our politicians have to shut it down. You know, it doesn't make it any better when Fox News, nothing more than a joke lately, Big C, Sean Hannity, and there's other commentators, they use the Colorado shooting to slam the Black Lives Matter protests, and I know they've had nothing better to do than that, but when you think about Fox News host and its reactionary guest went off on an asinine tangent rather than mourning about the loss of a police officer, Big C, and also some other innocent civilians in Boulder, Colorado. And that's the same, I mean, they're still probably celebrating when Colorado was in March Madness. That might be one of the reasons that they didn't play the game they should have played. Their thoughts and their hearts were elsewhere. But 10 people, including a police officer, lost his life. He's the guy who responded to that shooting. And they were killed by a gunman who opened fire at a King Snooper's grocery store. People just going to get a bite to eat. That was Monday afternoon. And the lone suspect is in custody. But when you have someone like a Hannity on Fox News, and they're not even talking about mourning a law officer's passing, they try to make it about something with the name Black in it, like Black Lives Matter. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's the thing, that Sean Hannity and Dan Bongino, that they're sitting there blasting Black Lives Matter, and Black had nothing to do with that yesterday in Boulder, Colorado, Charlton. That, this was an insane individual to go into a grocery store.
Yeah.
Where just people are shopping peacefully. I mean, we talk about essential workers, and this is what people go to a grocery store for essential items to survive.
That's right.
And you walk in there peacefully, not thinking anything negative, but you have these Fox News commentators blasting Black Lives Matter like Black Lives had something to do with that, Charlton. They did not. But this is how low that network has got. It's not even news. It's just it's a tabloid television, Charlton.
Yeah.
They don't talk about anything real.
Yep.
They want to be fear mongers and all of that. But to denigrate a culture of people who had nothing to do with this horrific event in Boulder, Colorado, that shows how racist they are as a broadcast company.
Yeah, there's just a joke, but you got to have a joke in media. That way you respect the other news that's not a joke. It's all fair, love, and war. I want to, again, thoughts and prayers with everyone dealing with the latest situation in Boulder, Colorado. I wish them the very best, and hopefully they'll find out how to solve that problem from happening again. I want to jump to the world of college basketball, Big C. The Pac-12 dominance and highlights is amazing. It shows that there's something about the Sweet 16 when you give people a chance to get on the field or in the floor or in the arena when they get a chance to compete for something. Then sometimes you get a little bit different result than just having somebody give their opinion over who should be invited to the dance. It's amazing. If they left it up to the voters to decide who's going to play in the Final Four, then these Pac-12 schools would have not been invited because the national media is so biased toward the South and the East Coast. But when they allow them to play it on the court, Big C, it's a different result. The Pac-12 football, some people say it's a doormat, but it's the same thing. The Pac-12 graduates as many people as any other conference in the country, and they also have as many players drafted into the NFL in every sport than many conferences in the country. In fact, they've won over 250 championships combined, over 200 more than the next closest conference, which I think is the Big Ten. But when you think about it, Big C, you think about the surge in men's college basketball tournament, the glorious, empathic, and unexpected fashion, some people say. The league has locked down 25% of the Sweet 16. I want the national media to hear this, because the same national media that said they didn't have good enough teams to get into the tournament is the same national media that says the Pac-12 football champion should not be allowed to participate for a championship. And when they allowed them to play, the Pac-12 has 25% of the Sweet 16, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the national media did vote the basketball teams in, but you got to field position, and they've gotten hot at the right time. But it's a progression when you get to the right shooting perspective in the national tournament, Charlton. That's the difference. I mean, if you boast about what goes on all year long in the qualifying rankings, this year is a little different. There'll probably even be an asterisk on the national championship, Charlton, but they played themselves well in the tournament. I mean, they played a lot better in the tournament than what they played during the regular season.
Yeah, well, they played against themselves in the regular season, but again, it just shows anybody, when you get people in the ring or on the same football field or basketball court, they can play and determine who gets in, and that's why I don't like with some good old boys will say, well, we have the best football team, and you haven't even played the conference that you won't let in. But think about this. In order of the least surprising to the most surprising, Big C, number 7 seed Oregon, number 6 seed USC, number 7 UCLA that has more national championships than anybody throughout history, and number 12 Oregon State. Only Colorado, and again, there was that shooting that happened in Boulder, and the Colorado Buffaloes looked flat. I'm sure that's the same city where the University of Colorado is located in Boulder. So they didn't play very well, and it showed like they had a lot of their mind, Big C. But the highest seed in the Pac-12 team of them all, they were number 5, and again, they had the tragedy in Boulder, so their heart wasn't in it. No other league had more than 2 teams. In the Big Ten, universally considered the premier conference in the country, they advanced only 1 in 9 teams. And you think about that when people start deciding who's going to play for championships, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, like I said, it comes down to getting hot during the tournament. If you look at teams that can shoot the 3, that will make the difference at any point in the tournament, Charlton. As you said, the University of Colorado, which is in Boulder, where the shooting took place, campus is only about 15 miles away from that supermarket, Charlton, where that horrific incident occurred. But the Pac-12 has played themselves well to have 25% of the Final Four teams, Charlton. Yes, they do play each other in the conference throughout the season, but, those non-conference games against non-big-time opponents, Charlton, they were only 4-8 during the season. So, that has people looking at them a little different when it comes to seeding. Yeah,
maybe, but maybe not. That's why I believe you expand the playoffs, you let teams get in, and they can earn it on the court. You think about some of the facts, though. The Pac-12, they blooded each other throughout the regular season, as we talk about. The league winner, Oregon, lost 4 times in conference. USC lost 3 times to Colorado. UCLA came into the tournament on a 4-game losing streak, which set off some alarms in Westwood. But the Pac-12 also started late. I know with all the COVID starting, football started late, basketball started late, so they didn't get a chance to start early like some of the schools in the South that don't believe in science, and some of the schools up north. They said, who cares about COVID? We just want to play a sport. So the Pac-12, they may have started out a little bit slow, but when you look at who they've beaten, a lot of those teams that even had more time to practice, a lot of them lost by double digits in the tournament, Big C. So all the people that say the West Coast doesn't play good basketball, they don't know their facts, Big C. You look at the quality of the conference, undoubtedly under pressure by outsiders, Big C, but you got to look at the dominance. Because in the Pac-12, you look at the teams that have won, they started later than some of the teams that were seated above them, Big C, and they still beat most of these teams by double digits, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, in basketball, it's not like football because you're not looking at as much contact. These basketball players run up and down the court all the time, so you don't have to run the plays that you do in football. So when you think that basketball's starting sooner or later, they're basically all starting at the same time because when you break out in practice, you're going at the same time. When they start fall practice for basketball, Charlton, it's a unilateral thing across the country.
Yeah, you sound like one of those Southern pollsters, Big C. You sound like one of those Southern pollsters that had a lot of crap to talk until they put it on the hardwood, and there's a little bit different thing to chew on. It's all fair and level war. The Pac-12, they were 4-8 against fellow Power 6 conferences, Big C, and they had a couple of bad losses. But I want to bring this up, too. They had some losses, Pepperdine, UC Riverside, Montana, UTEP, Wyoming, and Portland. But I want people to think about this. In the SEC conference, I think it was 2 years ago, or it could have been this past season. I think it was 2 years ago. In fact, I'm pretty sure, because it's before COVID hit, LSU came out to Los Angeles. They played USC in basketball. USC beat LSU. LSU goes back and does a lot of damage in the SEC. This year, Stanford University, that did not even make the tournament, they beat Alabama. Alabama's an SEC champion. You can Google it. It's right there in writing. And still with that, people say, well, the Pac-12 doesn't play good basketball, but they happen to have beaten champions that are out of the SEC. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about what you do during the regular season versus what you do during the playoffs, when we see conference champions that have been eliminated from the tournament already, Charlton, I mean, it's like you look at the Big Ten. There's one team left out of the Big Ten. That's Michigan.
Yeah.
And yet highly ranked teams out of that conference are no longer playing.
Yeah.
It will come down to the Sweet 16 to see who's playing well during that time. But Alabama is probably the hottest team in the tournament right now.
Yeah, well, Stanford chopped them down. It's all fair in love and war, but they couldn't swim through the Pac-12. We're going to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. When we come back, I want to talk more about, one shining moment. I don't think I sang it as well as Teddy did, but in the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C Pause, also known as the Big C Timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. I also want to say thank you to Xfinity Comcast TV and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and do it now. Say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. And you can tell a friend, especially my friends at CNN News, It's All Fair in Leavenworth. Big C, college basketball, when you look at college athletes, man, it makes me feel young again, Big C. But when you look at college athletes, you always have to wonder, at least I wonder, like what's on the menu in the pregame and postgame meals. I think about the Big C burger. You know, we say it's a tasty burger. It comes with exotic meats. It also goes great, keeping college kids in mind, with Budweiser Zero because it has 0% alcohol, and it goes great with the Big C burger. I want to throw you some names, and I hope it doesn't whet your appetite too much, Big C, but there's a plethora of animal mascots. You would think that Big C named all the mascots for these colleges, Big C. You think about the great Oral Roberts. You think about the Oregon Ducks, the Creighton Blue Jays. Big C, that's 3 birds. That would go great on the Big C burger, Big C.
Well, you're talking about having wings. You know, finger food are a big time thing in sporting events when you're watching them in a facility away from the arena, Charlton. And chicken wings are always #1 on the menu.
They're always #1. You would think they can fly away being #1 on the menu. Another one that makes me think that Big C named all the mascots for these programs. There are 8 programs that have mammals, Big C. The Gonzaga Bulldogs, the Michigan Wolverines, the UCLA Bruins, the Houston Cougars, the Oregon State Beavers, Arkansas Razorbacks. You have the Villanova Wildcats and the Baylor Bears. You can't tell me they wouldn't say it's good on the Big C burger, Big C.
Well, Charlton, I have dove into some bear in my lifetime, but I've eaten plenty of Razorback. I'm a glutton to have some ribs, and a Razorback wouldn't last long in my backyard.
I've seen that. I had some Hawaiian friends. They had a luau, and they were doing the whole pig. All they did was shave it. They had everything that you could see. It was hard to look at, but man, it sure tastes good, Big C. Also, when you think about the humans, there is still room for humans, Big C. The USC Trojans, man, they got some twin towers that are doing their things. They block everything down for the Trojans, Big C. The Florida State Seminoles, Big C. That's, if a Trojan and a Seminole met, that would be a nice war if you like wars, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about those 2 programs, Charlton, that's truly East Coast, West Coast. Florida State really has a lot to play for this year. When you think about their coach, he tore his Achilles tendon in the championship game, Charlton, of their tournament.
Yeah.
And he's been right there every step of the way throughout the tournament.
Yeah, that's amazing, too. I guess you got to have a lot of moxie to fight through all that pain. Also, when you think about, there's some vague ideas. When you think about this, I'm not saying eat everything you see, Big C, but the Alabama Crimson Tide, I believe that's an elephant. I've never had an elephant, and I don't think it would be long on the Big C burger. The Syracuse Orangemen, I like orange juice. And then you have the Loyola Chicago Ramblers, Big C. That's something that's somewhat significant. But what does that mean, Big C, you thought?
Well, the Ramblers, I believe that was some type of car, Charlton, but I did have a pair of cowboy boots that were made out of elephant at one point.
Yeah. Hopefully you didn't wrestle the elephant on your own. You just bought it when you walked into the store. It's all fair and love. So when you think about mascots, maybe Big C named them all. At the same time, how do you like yours? You like it served? Would you like it fried or grilled? I like my stuff grilled, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it all depends on the meat, Charlton. Those chicken wings got to be fried.
You got to have the deep fried chicken wings, although a lot of people bake them in the oven, too. It's all fair and love and war. But there's some mascots out there for your name, and I really love having fun with some of the mascots running around in the world of the college sports, Big C. I also want to bring you to another great thing when it comes to college basketball. The Michigan Wolverines were considered the most vulnerable #1 seed after losing senior forward Isaiah Livers to an injury just prior to the postseason. You really got to credit Coach Juwan Howard, Big C, with circling the wagon, coming through with 2 strong wins, Big C, and then extended the same credit to Jay Wright, the guy maybe the best-dressed man in college basketball, the coach for Villanova, and working around the injury of guard Colin Gillespie, Big C, and they advanced to the Sweet 16 as many people thought they would, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Michigan is a long-standing member of the Big Ten. Charlton is still playing basketball. Jay Wright came out of the Big East, Charlton, and he's been a common figure when you come to the Sweet 16 in his coaching team.
Yeah, he's been doing, and they had some great recruits over there at those 2 great East Coast co-rounders. Jay Wright, you think about Wright, he's also one of just 2 coaches still dancing who has won a national championship. The other is maybe the more respected and the coach with Syracuse, Jim Boeheim. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, these 2 longtime combatants, Charlton, come out of the same conference, and once again, they're meeting up in March Madness.
Yeah, they're meeting up in March Madness, and I'm glad that they were able to get through all the COVID protocol and still have a strong showing in March Madness, college basketball's finest event, Big C. They're also joined by 4 others who've been to the Final Four. You think of Gonzaga's Mark Few. I think they'll have the one shining moment to cut down the lights this year, or cut down the basketball ring court, Big C. Oregon's Dana Altman, he's been doing his thing with the Oregon Ducks. They look very solid, Big C. You think about Loyola's Porter Moser, Big C. I think a lot of people are surprised that Loyola's here again, but if you watch them play, they're a really good basketball team. And then you have Houston's Kevin Sampson, Big C. If you keep in mind that since 2008, it was only the great Tony Bennett in 2019 and Kevin Ollie in 2014 have won. Think about their first trip in the Final Four, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, this is going to be an interesting Final Four this year, Charlton. I like Florida State with Leonard Hamilton, and I like Alabama with Oaks, head coach. I mean, those 2 teams right now are playing extreme basketball.
Yeah.
They're long. They shoot the 3-point shot very well. And I think that's what's going to determine the champion this year, Charlton, is who has the better hand at the 3-point shot and getting those rebounds.
Yeah, whoever has that is going to help them a lot. But you got to be able to run up and down the court with Gonzaga because they can run. They remind me of the UNLV teams back in the day with the Jerry Tarkanian. They're not the most physical, but man, they run and they run and they run and seem to when they get to 80, they're not even breaking a sweat when they get to 80 points. It's all fair and love and war. But when you think about the round of 32, Big C, the Cinderella crowd was thick. Oral Roberts, when you think about Oral Roberts and religion, just second. Think about this: just the second number 15 seed to make it this far. It carries the hopes and dreams of the true long shots and more than a few Baptist programs as well. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of prayers going out there, Charlton, in Oklahoma for this university.
Yep.
I mean, you got to think about them and Loyola, Chicago, that you got a little boost on your side with somebody going to Mass.
Somebody going to Mass. Everybody prays for the basket to go in. It's all fair and love and war. But you think about after defeating Florida on Sunday, Florida's a good program. But after knocking out Florida, school president William Wilson declared that we can't wait to represent God and Oral Roberts in the Sweet 16. That makes sense to you, Big C?
Well, you got to look at, having a higher inspiration and someone looking over your shoulder for that perspective, Charlton.
Yeah, it's always nice to invoke God when you're trying to get a miracle and get the ball to fall through the hoops. It's all fair and love and war. But I wish everybody nothing but the best. March Madness, looking for that one shining moment. I do believe it's going to be Gonzaga. Now, I'm telling you also, a team that's going to make a lot of noise outside of Gonzaga. USC has a really good, they have this twin towers that block everything down near the basket. UCLA plays Alabama in the next matchup. That should be a good matchup to watch also. Really looking forward to seeing how that turns out. I want to jump to the role of the NBA because NBA basketball is fantastic. Daniel House Jr., Big C, hit a 51-footer at the buzzer, sending the Houston Rockets, who had liftoff last night, the Houston Rockets, to a high of 20 straight games. They snapped the streak of losing 20 in a row, and it took a 51-foot buzzer to make them think, you know what, we can do this, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that was the motivation for them going into halftime, Charlton, when Hauser hit that 51-foot shot, as the buzzer went off, to let them know that they had a chance. All they had to do was keep chugging along. Yeah,
you got a chance to keep chugging along. I think it was a great Jim Carrey in some movie, I forget, I think it was Dumb and Dumber, that he asked this woman, so what chance do I have of dating you? She said about 1% chance, and he said, so you think I have a chance, right? So all you need is a chance, Big C. And when you think about that chance, the Rockets went on to snap their 20-game losing streak on Monday as John Wall had a triple-double. And think about this. In 5 years, in a 117-99 victory over Toronto, but John Wall had a drive to the basket. He was on the right side of the basket, and I believe he turned around twice, but I'm just going to say he did it once and went off the glass. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, John Wall, I mean, here's a guy who's been one of the best paid players in the league.
It's amazing.
And to only have accomplished his first triple-double in 5 years, Charlton, really says that, something about this Houston organization.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this was a team that was in desperation mode.
Yeah.
And to go on the 20-game losing streak, you got to look at professionals.
Yeah.
They don't go out there wanting to lose, Charlton.
No.
And it has to be demoralizing to get to that point of a season where you've had that much futility working against you.
Yeah.
But they never gave up. And they kept shooting, kept hustling, kept rebounding, and they ended up breaking that 20-game losing streak.
Like Jim Carrey said in the movie Dumb and Dumber, so you think I have a chance. Yeah, you always get a chance where you can knock it down from 51 feet away, Big C. Houston's skid was tied for the 9th worst in NBA history and the longest since Philadelphia's record-setting 28-game losing streak, and that was back in 2014-15 and the 2015-16 season. But when you think about what Wall did, 19 points, 10 assists, 11 rebounds, his first triple-double since March 17, 2016. That helped the Rockets get liftoff, Big C, their first win since February 4th. So you got the 51-foot shot, and you had him do this curly nil-style layup where he done it. I know he spun around at least once. It looked like twice, but I know it was an amazing. And so they had up 2 miracle plays that happened to snap the win streak, Big C, or the losing streak, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the miracle for them, Charlton, is this is the first win that they've had in 7 weeks.
Yeah.
You think about how demoralizing that is. You walk around for 7 weeks
Yeah.
and you can't win a basketball game.
Yeah. I know a lot of people walking around for 7 weeks not having things going right, but you got to keep fighting, like the great Jim Carrey says. So you still think I have a chance. It's all fair in love and war. NBA basketball, the great Kawhi Leonard, also known as the Claw, Big C, scored 25 points. Terrence Mann added a season-high 21. And the L.A. Clippers, they ate a little bit of bird last night, Big C. The Clippers rallied from a 22-point deficit in the second half to snap the Atlanta Hawks' 8-game winning streak, 119-110 victory. It was Monday night in Los Angeles. It was desperately needed. And just like anybody else, when you're hungry, sometimes people just want some bird wings, Big C.
Well, you got to think about the Hawks, Charlton. This is the first loss since Nate McMillan has taken over that organization. And to have a 22-point deficit overcome by the Clippers, Charlton, had to be heart-wrenching for those Atlanta Hawks who have been on an 8-game winning streak.
Yeah, you call it heart-wrenching. We call it home cooking in California. It's all fair. Atlanta Hawks felt like a lot of teams that play SEC football teams. Like, what do you mean? That was not a foul? It's all fair in love and war. That was called home cooking California style. Luke Kennard made all of 8 of his shots and scored all of his season high, tying 20 points in the second half, Big C, for the Clippers, who fell behind 88-66 in the third quarter after a frustrated coach, Ty Lue, put a small lineup of 5 reserves. Big C, I know people don't believe this, and I like seeing fair, but I know I don't want to see everything that the referees know, but I'm telling you, that was a lot of home cooking to erase a 20-point deficit in the win by almost double digits, Big C. You can't tell me there wasn't a little bit of home cooking, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's what you're going to face when you go to California, Charlton, and play out there against those greedy grabbers that you have on the West Coast. I mean, here's the Hawks only scoring 22 points in the fourth quarter, Charlton, and being outscored, giving up a 22-point deficit to a team that you give up, really 50 points in the fourth quarter. It seems uncanny and unable to do that, Charlton, when you think about it. But you got to get some help from the referees when you erase that type of deficit.
We heard a great announcer back in the day, and it may be an announcement meant for the Hall of Fame. It says, "Do you believe in miracles?" Is all fair. In Leavenworth, the Clippers believe in miracles, Big C. Trae Young, the great Trae Young, had 28 points. He had 8 assists, and John Collins scored 23 points for the Hawks in their first loss of March, Big C. And think about this. Their first under new coach Nate McMillan, Atlanta's winning streak was as longest since January of 2015. And I love West Coast sports. But I'm saying there were some shenanigans in that game last night. My opinion, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at that. Trae Young had 20 points in the first half and was only able to muster up 8 points in the second half.
Yeah.
But the officiating, I mean, we've seen some questionable officiating
You think?
in the NBA over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Players complaining about it. And last night was another issue.
Yeah, and so I've been told if a tree falls in the forest and no one sees it, does it make a sound? Of course it makes a sound, but if you don't blow the whistle, it's not making a sound, if that makes sense to you. It's all fair and love. More other NBA news. The great Donovan Mitchell scored 30 points. The great Rudy Gobert added 21 points, 10 rebounds, and a career-high 9 blocks. Big C, the Utah Jazz. They pounded the Chicago Bulls 120-95 on Monday night. If you ever notice when they talk about Chicago now, about back in the 1980s and 90s, you would always hear Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Now it's just Chicago Bulls. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, at this pace that they're playing right now, maybe they need somebody named Michael on the roster because the guy named Rudy came in there with a broom.
Yeah, he came in with a broom. And Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. I went to a basketball game. It was at the old United Center, and they announced all the crowd. They were playing the Utah Jazz, and they announced Michael. He was the Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. No Scottie Pippen, no Hornacek, none of these other guys. It was just the great Michael. It's all fair and level war. But you think about the Western Conference leaders. They took control in the first half. They rolled up their second straight win after losing 5 of 8. Mitchell, he made 5 3-pointers, one shy of his season high. The two-time All-Star also had 6 rebounds and 6 assists. He's a lot better player than people give him credit for. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no, he's a perennial all-star, Charleston. He just doesn't get the notoriety media-wise because he's playing up there in Utah, Charleston. It's not a large television market, so you don't see him on a lot of broadcasts. You see New Orleans on more television than you see the best team in the NBA, Utah.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Big C. Maybe we need Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz when they announce him for their next home opener, if that makes sense to you. And then you think about the great Rudy Gobert. He missed his first triple-double by a Jazz player since February 13, 2008. Think about this. Carlos Boozer had 22 points, 11 rebounds, and 10 assists in Seattle, Big C. And that's when they played at Seattle. Man, Seattle needs another basketball team. He also surpassed his previous high. He had 8 blocks, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he's that rim protector that's not a big thing now in the NBA, but Rudy Gobert has always been noted for his stalwart defense and rebounding and blocking shots, and he did it all last night.
Yeah, he did it all last night. Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz. Is all fair level war. I really appreciate the way basketball is played. Even sometimes you get the home cooking. It's all fair in level war. Big C, the NFL, the great George Blandon, played pro football for the Oakland Raiders. He played 26 years. Actually, if you think about it, that's amazing. People talk about how long guys are playing now. But 26 seasons, Big C, longer than any other person. He'll probably be best remembered for his 1970 season with the Oakland Raiders, Big C. That year, in a 5-game period, the great George Blandon, he provided Oakland with 4 wins and 1 tie. It was a last-second touchdown pass and field goals. Big C, he was 43 years old, also doing his thing. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, everybody wants to talk about the GOAT, Charleston. Here's a guy who played 26 years in the NFL, played with the Chicago Bears, the Houston Oilers, the Oakland Raiders, Charleston. But 26 years doing anything, that's a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so when they want to talk about someone playing 20 years, Jim Marshall did it at defensive end. Jackie Slater did it at offensive tackle. Tom Brady has done it at quarterback. But George Blandon did it 26 years as quarterback and kicker in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Brown kicked when he was in college. I don't think he kicked in the NFL, but Blandon has done everything. Quarterback, kicker, yelling at people when he had to. It's amazing what those old-time Raiders, even John Madden. John Madden's still around. And I remember I did a commercial with the great John Vella. He was an offensive lineman for USC. He was back in Hayward, California. He had a locker room. It's called Raider Locker Room. And I remember talking to John Vella, and we were doing a commercial, and the Raiders were just coming back from Los Angeles to Oakland. And I think they played, at that time, the Houston Oilers in Oakland at the Coliseum, Big C. And he was so excited about having the Raiders come back and all the great years that he'd had with the Oakland Raiders. And I wonder how they feel now with what John Gruden and Mark Davis have done to that franchise. That would not be acceptable under the late, great Al Davis. It's all fair and level war. But back to the great George Blandon. Blandon made history in 1971 when he kicked a 15-yard field goal. Big C. Actually, it was 15 field goals, and he tossed 4 touchdown passes for the Raiders while remaining with the team. And some people say he did it strictly for the prescription medication. Your thoughts?
Well, you think about an athlete, Charlton, and what he has accessibility to at that time in his career. You think about it, he was 44 years old at that time.
Yeah.
But his body had broken down. Even early in his career with the Chicago Bears, he played linebacker also. So when you think about a guy that played on both sides of the ball, in the most pivotal positions, linebacker and quarterback, and kicked, his body had broken down at that time at 44 years of age. But to be able to get those prescription drugs from a team, Dr. Charlton, it was much more accessible than trying to go get it from a pharmacy.
Yeah, and I believe he played at the University of Kentucky, back at the Southern guy. But it's amazing how just seeing those Raider teams, the great Raider teams back in the day, and how they played at the Oakland Coliseum before they put up Mount Davis. And the weather was always a little bit soggy. Not cold, but a little bit soggy. It had a lot of sunshine. But there was something about that team, whether you're looking at the Raiders over the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and maybe even some of the 90s, when they were a team that you talked about the way people talk about right now the Kansas City Chiefs. You talked about the Raiders the way people talk about the New England Patriots. You talk about the Raiders the way people talked about right now the Green Bay Packers or the Seattle Seahawks. They were always a playoff team. And to realize this great franchise, they've only had one playoff year, really, since they lost their last Super Bowl, Big C. And the guy that took them there, they got rid of him. They also got rid of Reggie McKenzie. And it's amazing how they're just accepted that losing is normal, but it's never been normal for this franchise. But hey, Mark Davis knows what he's doing. His daddy knew nothing about football. It's all fair in love and war. Going to NFL also, the great Kirk Cousins makes another $35 million, Big C. How does he have a slot machine in his house, Big C?
I know he has a money counter if nothing else, Chuck, but when you talk about a guy who has worked the NFL system, nobody has done it better than Kirk Cousins over his career in the NFL.
Yeah, so the great Jim Harbaugh was wrong when he said, who's got it better than us? Nobody. He had to say Kirk Cousins, Big C. Few NFL players have worked the system to their advantage greater than the great Kirk Cousins out of Michigan State, Big C. And when you think about it, he played out a pair of franchise tags in 2016. I'm not knocking him. And also 2017, earning $19.95 million and $23.94 million, respectively, before becoming a free agent. So he does have a slot machine in his house, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, he gambled on himself. So he's got a casino if he's gambling on himself. And many players won't go the route that Kirk Cousins did. Yeah. I know you and your cousin had a lot of conversations building up to that. You probably talked him into doing that, and that's what brought him his success. But, you have to have the confidence as a player to go out on the limb like he did. Yeah,
well, he said he would split the $35 million, but I guess it's in the mail. That's all fair and level war. But he did sign a 3-year, $84 million contract with the Vikings 2018. A 2-year, $66 million extension added in 2020. That extension includes a $35 million base salary for 2022. And as of Friday, become fully guaranteed. So he does have a slot machine someplace, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, he's got a slot machine, he's got a safe deposit box, and he's got it all sitting in a vault someplace. But when you look at football players and everybody's talking about who's the greatest, who's the best quarterback around, you got to give your cousin some credit. He's the greatest negotiator amongst all quarterbacks. Yeah. To have made as much money as he had in the NFL and never really had a winning record, that's called greatness.
Yeah, never. And I don't think he's been to a Super Bowl. And in fact, I know he hasn't been to a Super Bowl. But hey, if they're willing to give you that money, you may as well go ahead and sign the contract. All fair, 11 word, Big C. Whenever Cousins goes in 2023, he'll make $193 million. Think about this. $193 million, Big C, over 7 years. As of today, last portion of it, $35 million in 2022, becomes fully, completely guaranteed. Here's a guy, not even a Super Bowl appearance. I mean, never won an NFC championship game, but he's made almost $200 million over the last 7 years was this is completed, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, this shows the impartiality of the NFL, how they're getting it wrong when we talk about salary cap structures, Charlton. You're giving people money that have not been successful in the league.
Yeah.
And those quarterbacks that have been successful, how can the media blast them and say they're not that good of a player? When you look at somebody like your cousin up in Minnesota, making almost $200 million over a 7-year span, Charlton, and has one playoff win to show for it.
Yeah, it's something's not right. Sometimes the math doesn't add up. I guess when you go on to sign your contract, like the great Jerry Maguire movie, Big Z, make sure you get people something to drink to have them relax their nerves and their common sense, if that makes sense to you. Also, when you think about guys that have been able to move around in the NFL, the Chiefs still have work to do on the offensive line, especially at left tackle. So they're making some things that may have already happened, but I want to make sure that I understand that. I think it's going to be great for Denver. They choose running back Mike Boone over Philip Lindsay. That's going to help them on the offense. But what I really like for Southern California, not the fact that the Clippers got some home cooking last night against those birds that flew in from Atlanta. All they needed was a barbecue grill. They got so much home cooking. But the Rams, they go back to the roots of Long Beach Poly's finest wide receiver, the great Deshaun Jackson, Big C. The Rams, they agreed to terms with the veteran wide receiver, Deshaun Jackson, on a 1-year deal. He fills a much-needed role for a deep threat receiver on an offense that's going to feature quarterback Matthew Stafford, who's also been robbing the bank and never won anything, not even a playoff game. But Deshaun Jackson, I saw him play college high school football at Long Beach Poly for the Jackrabbits. Saw him play in the Pac-10 at the time with the Cal Berkeley Golden Bears. He is a speedster and can get deep downfield, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that's just the first 6 games of the season, Charlton. He hasn't played more than 6 games the season in the last 2 seasons of the NFL. So he's an often injured guy who used to be great. And if he can stay healthy, he might help the Rams. But this is a guy that you hope to get to the halfway mark of the season.
Yeah, it'd be nice to just see him come out and do what he has to do for the Rams. Going back home sometimes makes him feel more rejuvenated. The Jets defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins for 2 years, $17 million. I'm telling you, there's something about this Jets team. Everybody thought they were tanking for some time last year, Big C, but they didn't tank. They added another key player on defense, agreeing Sunday to a 2-year contract, former New Orleans Saints defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins. And I think that's going to make their defense under Coach Saleh a lot better than it was last year, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the defense wasn't the problem with the Jets last year, Charlton. It was an ineptitude that they had on offense. A quarterback that they got from Southern California that throws more interceptions than he does touchdowns and, can't figure the game out.
Yeah, well, Darnold's going to figure the thing. He just needed some LASIK surgery. A lot of people don't know that. When you get mononucleosis, they say it affects your vision. I think that's proven by mononucleosis. How you get it, it's affected his vision before he got it and also after he got it. It's all fair in level where I think there's going to be a lot of good things happening in the world of football. Denver Broncos also cornerback Kyle Fuller agrees to a 1-year, $9.5 million deal, and that's going to help them on defense. Defense is going to be good for Denver this year also, especially with Von Miller coming back. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, all these acquisitions on paper mean very little until the guy makes the team and makes an impact on the team.
Yeah.
You're seeing people put together teams on paper for the past couple of years through free agency, and none of them have gotten to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's about the teams that already are established, that have that foundational base of winning, Charlton, that will repeat.
Yep, very well said. Also, college basketball, we have March Madness going on for the women's style. I don't like to give out scores because a lot of times people want to go and check what happened in the DVR, but watch that Oregon State and the South Carolina game. It should be a lot of good basketball for the women. I want to close out with some little politics, Big C. Kim Janey becomes Boston's acting mayor, makes history as the first African-American person and woman to hold office. A Roxbury native, city council for District 7. Janey's 55 years old, a former education advocate. Also will be Boston's first woman to serve as mayor, Big C. The Boston City Council president officially stepped into the role at 9:01 p.m. on Monday night, Big C. It was 1 minute after former Mayor Marty Walsh submitted a letter of resignation following his confirmation to become the nation's Secretary of Labor. So a lot of political news happening for the first time also in Boston, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, Boston has often been the last to do a lot of things for blacks in America. They were the last team to integrate in the National League as far as to have a black on the roster.
Yeah.
You think about all the vitriol that Bill Russell went through, the greatest center to play in the NBA, and won 11 championships for that city, and yet he left that city after winning all those championships after 13 seasons, Charlton. And to finally have a black woman as the mayor, the top official in that city for the first time in history. 2021, you got to realize Boston was the original part of the United States, and as far as when it became a country. And now in 2021, a city that, advocated for slavery and a state that, had a lot of vitriol towards black people. To have a black woman, and we've often talked, Charlton, on our show about the accomplishments of black women in American society. And to have this occur, Charlton, with Kim Jenny becoming the first black mayor of the city of Boston. What a historical feat when we also have the first black female vice president of the United States in the same year.
Boston, Massachusetts is a commonwealth, and a lot of good things that happen, and sometimes things take a long time to happen, but as long as you get it right, it's all fair and level war. Final story, NBA basketball. Hopefully the officials will not determine the outcome of games, but, it's all fair and level war. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? Yeah, it makes a sound. Tonight's matchup, NBA March 23rd, you have Denver at Orlando, Washington at the New York Knicks, Big C, LA Lakers at New Orleans, Phoenix Suns at Miami. Man, it's going to be hot in that arena tonight, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, the Lakers better hope that they can bring some heat down in New Orleans, Charlie. You're going to find out if those young ladies have anything left down in New Orleans and can get a big win in their conference.
Yeah, and then Phoenix at Miami is going to be the Suns coming into the heat. The heat's going to be turning up hot. In Miami is all fair level war. The 76ers are in Northern California here versus the Golden State Warriors. And the Brooklyn Nets, Big C, they're at Portland. Dollar Dame versus James Harden, must-see TV. Big C, your thoughts?
Both of these guards can turn it up. But we saw what happened to Portland in last time out. I think they got their butts kicked.
Yeah, sometimes that happens when you take a team for granted. It's all fair in 11 war. We wish everybody nothing but the best. May everybody rise and shine and do the right thing. It's all fair in 11 war. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you've got to use, how can you lose? Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
The sports universe is forever evolving. We've seen the amount of money that the New England Patriots have spent in free agency, bringing back a lot of veteran players, Charlton. We also have seen the first black mayor in the history of Boston, Charlton, an amazing feat. And once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, first responders, Charlton. They do amazing feats every day for America.
They do amazing feats every day for America. You can do amazing, too, when you rise and shine every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As my mama always says, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.